You wake up, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, you go to work, you come home, you eat, you sleep, and tomorrow you do it all again. And the day after that, and the day after that, week after week, month after month, year after year, and one morning you wake up and ask yourself a question that changes everything. Why? What is the point of all this? And the world doesn't answer. It never answers. That moment, that collision between your need for meaning and the universe's absolute silence, that's what Albert Camus calls the absurd. And once you feel it, you can never unfeel it. The absurd isn't a philosophy you study. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's a feeling. It's an experience. It's that moment when the machinery of your life suddenly becomes visible, when the repetition becomes unbearable, when the question why breaks through the surface of routine and demands an answer that never comes. Camus writes that the absurd is born from this confrontation between the human call and the unreasonable silence of the world. We are meaning-making creatures trapped in a meaningless universe. We ask questions that have no answers. We search for purpose in a cosmos that offers none. And that gap, that impossible distance, that's where we live. That's the human condition. But let's be precise about what Camus means, because the absurd is often misunderstood. It's not about life being silly or ridiculous. It's not about random chaos or the lack of logic in daily events. The absurd is specifically about the relationship between us and the world. It requires both terms. There must be a consciousness that demands clarity, that craves rational explanation, that needs things to make sense. And there must be a world that refuses to provide it, that remains fundamentally silent, fundamentally indifferent. Take away either term, and the absurd disappears. If you eliminate human consciousness, there's no one to ask the question. If you convince yourself the world does answer, that God has a plan or the universe has meaning, you've escaped into what Camus calls philosophical suicide. The absurd exists only in that tension, in that confrontation, in that unbridgeable gap. Think about what this means. Every day you perform actions, you go through motions, you follow routines. Most of the time you don't think about it. You're immersed in the doing. But then something happens. Maybe it's triggered by exhaustion, by loss, by a moment of unexpected stillness. Suddenly you step outside your own life and look at it from a distance. You see yourself as if you're watching a stranger, and you realize that everything you're doing, everything you've built, everything you care about, is fundamentally without justification. There's no cosmic reason for any of it. You invented the importance. You created the meaning. And beneath all your constructions, beneath all your stories, there's nothing but silence. That's the feeling of the absurd. That's the moment of lucidity. Camus identifies several situations where this feeling emerges most powerfully. The first is mechanical routine. When you've been doing the same thing for so long that the actions become automatic, when one day is indistinguishable from the next, when you can predict your entire week, your entire year, your entire life with depressing accuracy, the chain breaks. The question rises up, what am I doing? The second trigger is time itself. You suddenly become conscious of time passing, of aging, of moving toward death. All your busyness, all your accomplishments, all your plans, they're all temporary. Everything you build will crumble. Everyone you love will die. You will die. And time just keeps moving forward, indifferent, unstoppable. The third is other people. You look at someone and realize you can never truly know them, never bridge the distance between your consciousness and theirs. You're alone, fundamentally, irreducibly alone. And the fourth is death itself. Not just your death, but death as the ultimate fact that renders everything provisional. Nothing is permanent, nothing lasts, and there's no evidence, none whatsoever, that anything continues afterward. Now here's what makes the absurd so difficult. It's not that we don't know these things intellectually. Most people would agree, if asked, that life has no inherent cosmic meaning. Most people understand they're going to die, But intellectual knowledge is different from visceral feeling. The absurd is when you feel it, when it hits you in the gut, when it stops being an abstract idea and becomes the texture of your lived experience. And once you feel it, you have to respond. You have to decide how you're going to live with this knowledge. Camus says there are three main responses to the absurd, and only one is authentic. The first response is physical suicide. If life is meaningless, why continue? Why endure the suffering, the repetition, the inevitable disappointment? Just end it. It's logical in a way. The problem creates unbearable tension, so eliminate one side of the equation. But Camus rejects this absolutely. Suicide doesn't solve the absurd. It eliminates the confrontation by eliminating consciousness. It's an admission of defeat. It's saying the absurd wins, that meaninglessness is unbearable, that we cannot live with the truth. But the truth is bearable, more than bearable. It can be embraced. Suicide is the wrong answer to the right question. The second response is what Camus calls philosophical suicide, and this is more subtle, more common, and in some ways more dangerous. Philosophical suicide is when you take a leap of faith, when you decide to believe in something that gives life ultimate meaning even though you have no rational grounds for that belief. The most obvious example is religious faith. You're confronted with the absurd, with the silence of the universe, and you say, but there is an answer. God exists. God has a plan. Suffering has purpose. Death is not the end. This belief allows you to dissolve the absurd, to pretend it doesn't exist. But Camus sees this as intellectual dishonesty. You're sacrificing your reason, your lucidity, your clear vision of reality for the comfort of false hope. You're choosing consolation over truth. And many philosophers have done this. Kierkegaard acknowledged the absurd and then made his leap into faith. Existentialists like Jaspers and Shestov confronted meaninglessness and then embraced the irrational. But Camus won't follow. He refuses to sacrifice his lucidity. He will live with the absurd, not escape from it. The third response, and this is the one most of us actually practice without realizing it, is distraction. You feel the absurd rising up, you feel the question forming, and you immediately look away. You stay busy, you consume, you scroll, you work longer hours, you plan the next vacation, you buy something new, you start a project, you do anything at all, to avoid sitting with the silence. Modern life is perfectly designed for this. We have infinite options for distraction, entertainment, social media, news, work, hobbies. We can fill every moment, occupy every thought, never be alone with ourselves. And this works for a while. But it's exhausting, and it's dishonest because you know, deep down you know. The absurd is still there. You're just refusing to look at it. So if we reject suicide, both physical and philosophical, and if we reject distraction, what's left? This is where Camus makes his move. He says we must live in the absurd, not escape it, not deny it, not look away from it, but embrace it, accept it, stare directly at it and say, yes, this sounds impossible. How can you embrace meaninglessness? How can you live fully while knowing life has no cosmic purpose? But this is precisely Camus' genius. He shows that once you stop needing ultimate meaning, once you stop waiting for the universe to justify your existence, you become free. Free to create your own meaning, free to live passionately in the present moment, free to revolt against your condition without hope and without despair. Living in the absurd means maintaining lucidity. It means keeping your eyes open, never lying to yourself, never pretending the universe cares about you, never inventing false consolations. You live with full consciousness of your condition. And this consciousness, this refusal to be deceived, is itself a form of revolt. You're saying to the universe, I see you. I see your indifference. I see your silence, and I choose to live anyway. Not because life is meaningful, but because the struggle itself is enough. Not because there's hope for something better, but because this moment right now is all there is and all there needs to be. The absurd person, the person who lives authentically in this condition, experiences life differently. They don't defer happiness to some imagined future. They don't sacrifice the present for promises of eternal reward. They live in quantity rather than quality. What Camus means by this is that they accumulate experiences. They feel deeply. They engage fully with whatever life offers. They don't ask if something is meaningful in some ultimate sense. They ask if it's alive, if it's present, if it's real. They say yes to life not because it has meaning, but because saying yes is itself meaningful. The meaning comes from the living, not from some external validation. And here's the beautiful paradox at the heart of Camus's philosophy. The moment you stop needing life to have cosmic meaning is the moment you become capable of finding meaning everywhere. When you're not waiting for God to justify your existence, you can justify it yourself. When you're not deferring to some future salvation, you can experience salvation now in the taste of wine, in the warmth of sun on your skin, in the face of someone you love, in the satisfaction of work well done, in the simple fact of being alive. The absurd doesn't diminish life, it intensifies it, because every moment becomes precious when you know it's temporary. Every experience becomes valuable when you know it's finite. Every relationship becomes meaningful when you know it will end. This is what Camus means when he talks about revolt. Revolt is not violence. Revolt is not despair. Revolt is the decision to live fully, consciously, passionately in defiance of meaninglessness. It's saying no to the absurd's claim that life isn't worth living. It's saying yes to life, despite everything, or perhaps because of everything. You push your boulder knowing it will roll back down, and you push it again and again. And in that repetition, in that commitment, in that refusal to surrender, you become free. You become the master of your fate, not because you control outcomes, but because you control your response. The universe may be indifferent, but you are not. The cosmos may be silent, but you speak. Life may be temporary, but while it lasts, it's yours. So let me ask you something. Right now, in this moment, can you feel the absurd? Can you feel that gap between what you need and what the world offers? Can you feel the silence pressing in? And if you can, what will you do with it? Will you run? Will you lie to yourself? Will you look away? Or will you stand in that gap, feel its full weight, and choose to live anyway? Because that choice, that's where everything happens. That's where you become authentic. That's where you stop being a passive victim of circumstance and become an active creator of meaning. Not ultimate meaning, not cosmic meaning, but human meaning. The meaning you build with your own hands, in your own life, in defiance of silence. The absurd is not the end of philosophy. It's the beginning. It's the ground we all stand on, whether we admit it or not. And once you see it clearly, once you feel it fully, you can start to live, really live. Not the half-life of distraction or the false life of delusion, but the full life of conscious revolt. The life that says yes to existence, not because it's easy or meaningful or guaranteed, but because it's what we have. It's all we have. And that's enough. It has to be enough. And strangely, impossibly, beautifully, it is. What is your confrontation with the absurd? When did you first feel that gap between your questions and the world's silence? And how are you choosing to live with it? Let me know in the comments. Because we're all in this together. We're all pushing our boulders. We're all living in the absurd. And maybe, just maybe, that shared condition is itself a kind of meaning. Not the meaning we wanted, but the meaning we have.